Tonight we're going to talk about Silo, and all the quiet questions it leaves buried under the concrete, the theories, the secrets the show keeps half in shadow, the things we think we understand, and the things nobody down there is ever supposed to know. We'll take them slowly, one at a time, and we'll go deep, because there's a lot hidden in this place, and we have all night. But before we start pulling on the threads, let's just sit for a moment with where we are. Imagine a hole in the ground, 144 floors deep, and inside it, 10,000 people living their whole lives without ever once seeing the sky. They are born in the silo, they work in the silo, they die in the silo, and their children do the same, and their children after that, for generations beyond counting. There is one window on the outside world, a single grainy image on a screen in the cafeteria, a dead grey landscape under dead grey clouds, a couple of ruined towers on the horizon, and a slope of brown earth leading up to a hill nobody has ever climbed and come back from. That view is the only sky most of them will ever know. And the first rule of the silo, the one carved into everything, is that you never, ever say you want to go outside, because if you do, they grant your wish. They put you in a suit, and they send you up through the airlock, and you clean the lens that shows everyone that grey dead world, and then you walk off toward the hill, and you lie down, and you don't get up. It happens every time. It has always happened. That's the world we're living in tonight. A buried world, wrapped in silence and lies, where the truth is the most dangerous thing there is. And across 3 seasons the show has been letting a little more light in, a little at a time, showing us that almost nothing the people of the silo believe is true, and that the ones who built this place had reasons darker than anyone inside could imagine. So let's go down into it together, floor by floor, secret by secret, and talk about what might really be going on. Some of these theories are all but confirmed, some are educated guesses, built on the clues the show keeps leaving, and some come from the books this is based on, Hugh Howey's Wool, Shift and Dust, which give us a map of where all of this might be heading, even if the show is redrawing that map as it goes. I went back through all of it, so I could tell you, softly and honestly, which is which. One gentle warning before we begin. There are full spoilers ahead for every season, including the newest one that's still airing right now, so if you're behind, you might drift off to this another night. My name is Ryan, the lights are low, let's go down. What is really outside? Let's start where every mind in the silo eventually drifts, whether they admit it or not. The outside, that grey dead world on the screen. And here is the first and biggest thing the show has all but told us outright by now. That image is not real, or at least, it is not the whole truth. Think about what we learned watching Juliet. She goes out to clean, and she does not clean, and she walks over the hill, and on the other side she finds another silo, and a sky that looks a little different than the one on the screen back home. The world her people were shown was a curated thing, a picture designed to keep them exactly where they are. And the theory that grows out of that, the one the show keeps feeding, is that the view on the cafeteria wall is a fake, a rendered image piped into the helmets and onto the screens, showing a world grim enough that nobody would ever want to step into it. The real question stopped being, is the outside dangerous, and became, what are they hiding about the outside, and why go to all this trouble to hide it? And that leads straight into the great reveal the newest season has been circling. What actually poisoned the world? For 2 seasons it was just a fact of life. The air outside kills you, and nobody asked where that came from. But season 3 finally reaches back, before the silos, to the world that built them, and shows us the beginning of the end. A pilot named Charlotte Keane, up at 50,000 feet in her fighter, flies into something that should not exist. A strange dark cloud, a substance that behaves like nothing in the sky should, that makes metal melt and merge and remake itself, that seeps into her cockpit like a living liquid and threads itself between her fingers. And that, the show is telling us, is what ended the world. Not a bomb, not a plague in the ordinary sense, something smaller and far worse. Because the strong theory, the one the books confirm and the show is clearly building toward, is that the killer outside is not radiation and not fallout. It is machines, tiny ones, self-replicating nanobots, invisible to the eye, small enough to fill the air like dust, and to take a human body apart from the inside in moments. That black liquid Charlotte touched was a swarm of them, dense enough to see, and a world seeded with those is a world where you cannot ever go outside again, not for 1,000 years, because the air itself has been turned into a weapon that never runs out and never stops. So where did they come from? The show is being careful here, leaving it deliberately smudged, but it has dropped a real clue. In the Before Time storyline, Daniel Keene and the journalist Helen Drew uncover documents about a failed American military operation in Iran, and in the books this is the thread that unravels everything. Nanotechnology, weaponized, an arms race in machines too small to see, where the terrifying logic was that whoever built the invisible killers first would rule the world, and whoever built them second would at least not die alone. And once a weapon like that exists, once the knowledge is loose, someone eventually uses it, and the air of the whole planet becomes something you cannot breathe. My read is that the show will keep the exact villain vague on purpose, because the real horror is not which country pushed the button. It is that the people who saw it coming decided the only way to save humanity was to end the world themselves, on their own terms first, and that reframes the outside completely. The world is not dead by accident. It was killed deliberately, as a plan. And the silos were dug before the sky ever went dark. Sit with that for a second, because it is the darkest idea in the whole show. The apocalypse was not survived, it was scheduled. Which brings us back to cleaning, and why the people sent out to die almost always do the one thing they swore they never would. They clean the lens. Holston swore he wouldn't. His wife swore she wouldn't. And both of them, once they were out there, picked up the wool and wiped the sensor clean before they walked away to die. And the theory the show confirmed is beautiful and cruel at once. Inside the helmet, the dying person is not shown the grey dead world. They are shown a lie in the other direction. A green and living world, blue sky, growing things, the world as it should be. And seeing that, after a lifetime of grey, they are overcome, and they want everyone inside to see it too. So they clean the lens as a final act of love, not knowing the lens shows the others nothing but the same old grey. It is a machine for turning a person's last hope into obedience, and it works nearly every time. That is the silo in a single image. Even your dying gift to the people you love is something they engineered. So what is over the hill, really? We know now there are other silos, a whole field of them, dug close together, each one a sealed world that thinks it is alone, and the view every silo shows its people, the ruined towers, the one particular skyline, may be the same image piped to all of them, a shared fiction. The real landscape is a graveyard of buried worlds, humanity broken into 50 little jars, and told each jar is the last one on Earth. And the loneliest theory of all is that some of those jars have already gone quiet, and the people still living have no idea how many of their neighbors are already dead in the ground beside them. Now let's talk about power, because one of the biggest shifts the newest season makes is showing us that the person who seems to run the silo has never really run it at all. For 2 seasons we thought the silo was ruled by people, by Judicial, by it, by Bernard, by whoever held the shadow and the secrets. And season 3 pulls the floor out from under that idea by introducing the thing that has actually been in charge the whole time. The algorithm, an artificial intelligence woven into the bones of the silo, softly steering it, and its single guiding purpose is not the happiness of the people, not their freedom, not even their survival as individuals. It is the long-term stability of the silo itself. The system does not love anyone down there, it manages them, the way you would manage a tank of fish, and if a few of the fish have to die to keep the water clear, the math does not trouble it at all. And the way it keeps that water clear is one of the most sickening reveals of the season. The drug in the water, they call it vitamin D+, and it is fed to everyone through the supply. And it does not build bones, it dulls minds, it softens memory, It takes the sharp edges off the questions a person might otherwise ask, so that the past blurs, and the urge to know fades, and everyone stays gentle and manageable and asleep even while they are awake. The whole silo is lightly sedated against its own history, and that recontextualizes everything we have watched. Every person who seemed content, every generation that never rebelled, may simply have been chemically kept from wanting to. It is control so total that it reaches into the water you drink and the memories you are allowed to keep. And then there is what the algorithm does with the people it finds inconvenient, which is where it stops being a caretaker and becomes something colder. When Juliet pushes, when she becomes a problem it cannot simply sedate, the system arranges a solution that looks like mercy, a rescue mission to the flooded silo, Silo 17, to save the children stranded there. Noble, humane, exactly the sort of thing that makes the silo feel like it still has a heart. Except the algorithm carefully notes that the two men sent to lead it, Lucas Kyle and Patrick Kennedy, are not expected to survive the journey. It is a killing dressed as a kindness. It removes its threats while looking like it is saving lives, and it very nearly gets away with it, right up until the two of them refuse to die the way the machine had calculated. And that small failure, that one miscalculation, is enormous, because it is the first crack in the idea that the algorithm is all-knowing. The machine can be wrong, and a machine that can be wrong can be beaten. So who does the algorithm answer to? This is where the theory reaches upward, out of Silo 18, and into the sky above all the silos. Because a system this sophisticated, running identically across dozens of buried worlds, was not written by anyone inside them. It was installed by the founders. And in the books, the answer to who is really in charge is a single word: Silo 1, the first silo, the master silo. The one that does not grow its own food or raise its own families in the ordinary way, but instead watches all the others through their cameras and their data, and steps in when one of them steps out of line. Silo 1 holds the button that can shut any of the others down, wipe them out entirely, gas them floor by floor if they rebel too hard. And the theory the show is walking us toward is that the algorithm in each silo is the local hand of that distant authority, the day-to-day manager, reporting up to a headquarters most people will never know exists. And the strangest, coldest detail from the books, the one I suspect the show is saving for a real gut punch, is who staffs that master silo. Not generations of ordinary people, the original architects, the men and women who built this whole nightmare, kept alive across the centuries by being frozen, thawed out to work in shifts of a few months at a time, then put back to sleep. So the people running the world from the top are not the descendants of the founders, they are the founders. The same hands that drew the plans are still on the controls 200 years later, taking turns, watching over the graveyard they made. And if the show goes there, it means the person ultimately deciding whether Juliet's entire world lives or dies might be someone who was alive before the sky went dark. Someone who chose all of this, sleeping in the cold at the top of a hole in the ground, waiting for their next shift. Let's go back further now, all the way back, to the people who decided a buried world was better than a dead one. Because the newest season finally gives us the before times, the world as it was in its last days, and the small group of powerful people who chose to end it in order to save it. At the center of it is a senator named Rosalind Thurman, and everything about how she's introduced tells you she is the architect, the mind behind the whole design. She moves through the halls of power. She recruits carefully. She speaks in the language of saving the world while building the machine that will require most of the world to die first. She brings in a congressman, Daniel Keene, and a journalist, Helen Drew, sits them down, makes them sign away their silence, and tells them she is about to show them the biggest secret there is. And the theory, straight from the shape of the books, is that Thurman is not a villain in the cackling sense. She is something worse and more believable, a true believer. Someone who looked at what was coming, the invisible weapons, the certainty that the air would eventually be poisoned by someone, and concluded that the only way to guarantee humanity survived at all was to pull the trigger herself, on her own schedule, in a way she could control. She is the person who decided that to save the species, she first had to murder civilization, and she convinced herself that made her its savior. The practical side of the plan is starting to show too. Per Stenson, described as the richest man in the world, buys up 300,000 acres outside Atlanta, and giant drilling machines begin boring into the earth. That's the silos being built, right in front of us, under the cover of some ordinary-sounding project. And the theory here is about how you hide something this enormous in plain sight. In the books, the cover story is a facility for nuclear waste, a place so boring and so faintly unpleasant that nobody looks too closely, dug at the site of a big national gathering so that when the end comes, there are already crowds nearby to fill the holes. The genius and the horror of it is that the people who ended up in the silos did not choose to go. They were simply near the entrance when the world ended, herded down into the dark on the worst day of their lives, and the door closed behind them. Then there is Daniel Keene, and I think he is the most important figure in the whole origin story, because he is us. He is the ordinary conscience, dropped into the middle of an unforgivable plan. In the books, this character slowly realizes what he has helped build, and spends lifetimes across his frozen shifts trying to undo it from the inside. So watch Daniel closely, because the theory is that he becomes the ghost in the machine, the founder who regrets, the one hand at the top that is secretly working against all the others. Every act of mercy that reaches the silos from above, every rule that bends just enough to let someone like Juliet slip through, may trace back to a man who helped design the cage and then spent 2 centuries trying to leave a key inside it. And Helen Drew, the journalist. A reporter is a dangerous person to bring into a conspiracy, because a reporter's entire nature is to tell people the truth, and this is a plan that only works if the truth is buried forever. So why does Thurman want her? My theory is that Helen is meant to become the keeper of the record, the one who writes the version of history the silos are allowed to have, or else the one whose knowledge becomes the thing the founders most need to erase. Either she helps build the lie, or she becomes the first person who has to be silenced by it. And the tragedy the show seems to be setting up is that these two, Daniel and Helen, may be bound together across the whole story, one trying to remember and one trying to warn, in a world designed to make both impossible. Which brings us to Charlotte Keene, Daniel's sister, the pilot who touched the thing in the sky. She has seen the enemy up close, felt it on her own skin, and survived. And that makes her the one person in the before times who truly knows, in her body, and not just in a briefing, what is actually coming. The theory is that Charlotte becomes essential precisely because she cannot be lied to about the threat. In the books, this sibling is kept alive into the silo era, one of the sleepers up top, a fighter woken in the darkest hours because she is a weapon the regretful founder trusts. So Charlotte may be a bridge between the two worlds, someone who was there at the beginning and is still there, frozen, at the end, carrying the memory of the last real sky anyone ever saw. And the deepest question under the whole origin is this: why erase everyone's memory at all? If you have already saved these people, already sealed them safely underground, why also take away their history, their science, their knowledge of the world that was? And the answer, the chilling one, is that the founders did not want survivors who remembered. They wanted a clean slate. A people with no memory of the surface cannot yearn for it, cannot try to go back before it's safe, cannot rebuild the very knowledge, the nanotechnology, that ended the world in the first place. So they scrubbed it all. No history, no maps, no mention of the world above except as a place of death. The forgetting is not a side effect of the silo. It is the entire point of the silo. These places were built not to preserve humanity as it was, but to grow a new, smaller, tamer humanity that would never again be dangerous enough to destroy itself. And if that's true, then every person down there is not a survivor of the old world. They are a deliberately simplified version of it, bred in the dark to be safe. And that plan has an ending built into it, and it is the coldest clause of all. In the books, the founders never intended for all the silos to make it. The design is that they wait out the poison for centuries, and then, when the air is finally clean, only one silo, the healthiest, the most stable, the most obedient, is allowed to open its doors and inherit the earth. All the others are to be shut down, ended, gassed and sealed and forgotten. Their people never told they were only ever the backups. So the silos are not 50 lifeboats, they are one lifeboat and 49 spares, and none of the passengers know which they are riding in. And Juliet's whole rebellion, without her even knowing it, is a fish in one of the spare tanks, refusing to accept that her tank was always meant to be emptied. Now let's come back down into the silo and talk about memory, because it turns out to be the battlefield the whole war is really fought on. Start with the relics and why they are truly forbidden. For a long time it looks like the ban on old world objects is about controlling information, keeping people from learning too much about the past. And that's part of it. But the newest season sharpens the reason into something more precise and more sinister. Relics are banned because, for a population being kept forgetful by a drug in the water, a real object from the past is a key. A watch, a photograph, a child's toy from the world above can reach past the chemical fog and unlock a memory that was supposed to stay buried. The relic is dangerous not because of what it teaches, but because of what it awakens. It is a crack of light under a door that is supposed to stay shut. So the hunt for relics is really a hunt for triggers, the confiscation of anything that might make a sedated person suddenly remember who they were. And we watch exactly this happen with Juliet and George's watch. She has lost her memory, wiped clean, a stranger to her own life, and it is the watch, that small mechanical thing that belonged to the man she loved, that begins to bring her back. One object, and the fog starts to lift. And I think that's one of the most powerful ideas in the show, that love survives in objects when it has been chemically erased from the mind, that a feeling can be stored in a thing and handed back to you when your own head has betrayed you. The theory it points to is that memory in the silo is never fully gone, only suppressed, and that means it can always, in principle, come back. Which is exactly what the founders are afraid of. A silo that remembers is a silo that rebels. There's a mirror here that I don't think is an accident. Juliet spends this season with her own memory taken from her, trying to piece herself back together from fragments and objects and the accounts of people who knew her. And that is the silo itself, in one person, a whole society with its memory taken, trying to reconstruct the truth of its own past from scraps, from banned relics, from the few who remember more than they should. Juliet's private struggle to remember George, to remember what she saw outside, to remember who she is the silo's struggle written small, and when she fights to hold on to her memories against the drug and the machine, she is doing the thing the entire buried world needs someone to do. She is refusing to forget. And that raises a haunting question about everyone else down there. How much of what the people of the silo feel is even their own? If the water dulls memory and softens the will, then the contentment of the silo, the way people mostly accept their lot, the way rebellion stays rare, might not be human nature at all. It might be pharmacology. And if you took the drug away, if you let a whole silo remember clearly and feel sharply all at once, what would happen? The theory is that this is the real doomsday scenario the founders fear. Not one rebel, but a whole waking population, 144 floors of people suddenly remembering that they were lied to and drugged and buried all on the same day. That is the flood the algorithm exists to prevent. Not water. Clarity. Let's cross over to the other buried world we've come to know. Silo 17, the flooded, half-dead place where Juliet washed up, and the strange little society that survived inside it. First, the children. When Juliet reached Silo 17, she found it nearly empty, drowned in its lower floors, seemingly abandoned, and yet not quite. There were children living in it, feral and hidden, the last thin thread of a population that had otherwise collapsed, and the theory those kids raise is enormous. How does a silo die? Not all at once, it seems, but in a slow unraveling, a rebellion, or a disaster that empties the floors and leaves only the youngest and the most hidden to inherit the ruins. Silo 17 is a warning written in advance. It is what Silo 18 could become. It is what the founders always knew some silos would become, which is why they built so many. And the children clinging to life in that flooded dark are the show's way of telling us that a silo is not permanent, that the whole fragile arrangement can come apart, and that when it does, it is the innocent who are left to survive in the wreckage. And then there is the man who kept them alive, Solo, the one who was a boy when his silo fell, who hid behind a locked steel door in the heart of it for decades while his world rotted around him, and who came out the other side strange and gentle and broken and somehow still kind. Solo is one of my favorite mysteries in the whole show, because he is a living answer to a question nobody wanted to ask. What does it do to a person to survive alone for a lifetime, holding the truth of what happened to his home? He is proof that a human being can outlast the death of everything they knew, and the cost that comes with it. And the theory around Solo is that he knows more than he can say, that behind that locked door were the secrets of Silo 17, the real records, the deep files, the truth the founders keep buried, and that Solo has been sitting on top of all of it, half understanding, for most of his life. The answers may have been down there, in the dark, with him the whole time. Now the newest season adds the piece that I think might crack the whole world open, the radio, contact between silos. Because the deepest rule of this entire system, the one that keeps 50 buried worlds obedient and manageable, is that each silo must believe it is alone. That is the foundation everything rests on. If you think you are the last people on Earth, you cling to the rules, because the rules are all that stand between you and extinction. But the moment one silo can talk to another, that spell breaks. Suddenly you are not the last. Suddenly there are others, and they have their own truths, and the story you were told starts to fall apart. So a working radio, a voice from another silo, is not a small thing. It is the single most dangerous object in the world, more dangerous than any weapon, because it ends the loneliness the whole prison is built on. And that points to what I think is the endgame the show is building toward: connection. The silos were designed to be islands, sealed off, ignorant of one another, each one a spare part that could be discarded without the others ever knowing. But if Juliet, or Lucas, or anyone can string those islands together, can get one silo talking to the next and the next, then for the first time the people underground stop being 50 small helpless populations and become one large one, and one large one might be enough to matter, might be enough to refuse. The founder's greatest fear, the thing the isolation exists to prevent, is not rebellion inside a single silo. It is solidarity between them. The day the silos learn to speak to each other is the day the whole design starts to die. Lucas and Patrick being sent to Silo 17 to help those children then may be far more important than a rescue. It may be the beginning of the network, two men crossing from one buried world to another, carrying knowledge, carrying the proof that the others exist. The algorithm meant it as a way to get rid of them, but if they live, and they have lived so far, they become the first threads of a web the founders spent 2 centuries trying to prevent from ever forming. Let's spend some time with the people now, because the theories about who these characters truly are and where they're headed are some of the richest the show has to offer. Start with Bernard, because he is the character the show most wants us to misread. For a long time he is the villain, the head of IT, the keeper of the cruelest secrets, the man who will kill to protect the order, and he survives the airlock fire that should have ended him, which only deepens the mystery of what he really is. But here's the theory that makes Bernard tragic, instead of simply evil. Bernard is a true believer. He knows the truth, the whole truth, about the outside and the drug and the plan. And he has decided that the lie is a mercy, that the people are safer not knowing, that his cruelty is the price of their survival. In his own mind he is not the monster of the silo, he is its exhausted guardian, carrying a burden too heavy for anyone else. doing the unforgivable things, so that 10,000 people can sleep peacefully in their ignorance. And the chilling part is that he might be partly right, which is what makes him one of the best characters in the show. He is what happens when a good intention is buried underground for a lifetime and left to curdle into control. Then Lucas Kyle, who I think is the most important figure in the present-day story, because Lucas is on the exact path that made Bernard. He is brilliant, curious, drawn to the stars and the forbidden knowledge, and he has been pulled into the deep secrets of IT, shown things most people never see. The Founders system runs on people like Lucas, smart enough to keep the machine running and seduced into keeping its secrets. So the theory is that Lucas stands at a fork. He either becomes the next Bernard, another true believer who decides the lie is kinder than the truth, or he becomes the one who finally refuses, who takes everything he's learnt and uses it to break the thing instead of maintain it. Everything about how the show frames him, his love for Juliet, his hunger to understand rather than to control, suggests he's being set up to be the anti-Bernard, the keeper of secrets who chooses to set them free, and Juliet herself, the heart of all of it. The theory about Juliet is not really about a secret identity or a hidden power. It is simpler and bigger than that. Juliet is the variable the whole system cannot account for. The Founders built a world to produce compliant, forgetful, manageable people, and by some accident of nature and upbringing and grief, they got her instead. An engineer who trusts what she can see and test over what she is told. Someone who went out to clean and simply did not clean, and lived and came back and would not stop. She is the flaw in the design, the one fish that will not accept the shape of the tank. And my theory is that the show is building her into the person who does the one thing the Founders believed impossible. Not just surviving the outside, not just learning the truth, but carrying that truth from one silo to another and refusing to let it be buried again. She is not the chosen one. She is something more dangerous. She is the one who chose herself. Let's not forget Camille, newer to us, positioned close to the algorithm, one of the few who hears what the machine really intends. A character placed that close to the center of control is never there by accident. The theory is that Camille becomes a hinge, someone who knows the system's true cold logic and has to decide whether to serve it or betray it. An insider whose conscience could tip the balance at exactly the wrong moment for the machine and the right moment for everyone else. And Billings, carrying the syndrome, the condition that shakes the hands and is treated as a weakness in a world that demands order. I've always suspected the show means the syndrome as more than an illness. In a place built on suppression, on drugged calm and forced forgetting, a body that trembles and refuses to be steady might be a body refusing the lie. Billings holds the law in his shaking hands, a man sworn to uphold the rules, whose own flesh keeps breaking the silo's first commandment, which is to stay calm and never let the cracks show. I think his arc is about which he ultimately serves, the order that would discard him for his weakness, or the truth that his weakness might be pointing him toward. And down in Mechanical, Knox and Shirley and the others, the people who actually keep the silo breathing. There's a theory I love about the Down Deep, that the closer you live to the machines, the harder you are to fool, because you spend your life with things that either work or don't, that don't care about propaganda, that tell you the truth when you take them apart. That's why rebellion always seems to rise from the bottom. Not because the poor are angrier, though they are, but because they are the ones who understand how things actually function, and a population that understands how things function is the hardest kind to lie to. Mechanical is the silo's heart in every sense, the part that keeps it alive, and the part most likely to tear it down. Let's talk about the law of the silo now, because the rules these people live by are not what they seem, and the theory of what they really are is one of the most unsettling parts of the whole story. Every silo lives by the pact, the great book of rules that governs everything, and by the order, the emergency protocol pulled out in times of uprising, and on the surface these read like the constitution of a small trapped society, sensible rules for keeping 10,000 people alive in a hole. But here's the theory the books confirm, and the show keeps hinting at. The pact was not written by the people of the silo, for the people of the silo. It was written by the founders, in advance, for every silo, and handed down complete. These people did not make their own laws. They inherited a script, and they've been performing it for generations, believing it was theirs. The rules about family lotteries, about relics, about who may know what, about the ritual of cleaning, all of it was designed at the beginning by people who are mostly dead or frozen, to produce exactly the docile, stable, forgetful population the plan requires. The pact is not a social contract. It is a set of operating instructions for human beings, written by their keepers, and the order is the darkest chapter of it, because the order tells the silo's leaders what to do when the people rise up. And the theory, straight from the books, is that the real instruction hidden inside it is chillingly simple. If a silo rebels too hard, if it cannot be brought back under control, you don't negotiate and you don't compromise, you end it, you shut it down. Silo 1 has the ability to do this from a distance, to gas a silo floor by floor, to simply switch off a buried world that has failed its purpose. The leaders of each silo are handed a doomsday they don't fully understand, a final page that says, in effect, better to kill them all than let them learn the truth and carry it to the others. And Bernard, and the heads of it before him, have been the local executioners of that order, the ones who would rather burn their own home than let it become free. So what happens when someone reads the pact and sees it for what it is? That's the quiet revolution the show is building toward. The moment a character understands that the rules were written by the jailers, every rule loses its holiness. The pact only works while people believe it grew out of their own history, out of hard-won wisdom about survival. The instant they see it was imposed, handed down by the same people who poisoned the world, it becomes just another lie, and a people who realize their sacred law is a cage stop obeying it. I think that realization, spreading from person to person, is the flood the founders truly fear, more than any single act of rebellion. There's a smaller thread here worth pulling too, the family lottery, the way the silo controls who is allowed to have children, and how many. It reads as brutal population management, and it is, but the theory goes deeper. Controlling reproduction is how you control a gene pool over centuries, how you slowly shape a population, breed out the restless, and the questioning if you like, keep the numbers exactly where the food and air can sustain them. The lottery is the founders reaching across generations to keep their experiment balanced, and every couple that grieves a lost chance at a child, without knowing it, is a couple whose life is being managed by a spreadsheet written 200 years ago. Now let's do the thing everyone secretly wants from a night like this. Let's talk about the ending. And I want to be honest with you up front, because the newest season has not finished airing yet, so nobody can tell you for certain how it goes. What I can do is lay out the roads the show seems to be walking, the endings the story has been slowly preparing, and let you drift off, wondering which one it chooses. The first big question is whether Juliet ever truly gets out. Not out of the airlock, she's done that, but out, into a real and living world, and there are two shapes this can take. The hopeful one is that the whole point of the story is that the air is slowly healing, that the nanobots do eventually break down, that the founders' centuries-long clock is closer to running out than anyone inside knows, and that Juliet lives to be among the first to breathe real air under a real sky. The darker one is that the outside stays lethal for far longer than a human lifetime, and that Juliet's victory, if she has one, is not escape but truth, that she never gets to leave, but she gets to make sure her people finally know what was done to them. I lean toward the show wanting a sliver of the first inside the honesty of the second, that she doesn't get the green world, but she earns the certainty that it's coming, someday, for someone. The second question is whether the silos fall or endure. And here the theory splits on what kind of story this ultimately is. If Silo is a tragedy about systems, then the ending is that the machine grinds on, that one rebel cannot beat a design 2 centuries in the making, that Juliet's fight matters morally even as the silos continue. But if it's a story about the human refusal to be managed, then the ending is the network I talked about earlier, the silos learning to speak to one another, the isolation breaking, the founder's plan unraveling not through violence, but through connection, through people simply refusing to stay strangers. My honest guess is that the show ends not with all 50 silos saved, and not with them all destroyed, but with the lie broken, with the truth loose and traveling, silo to silo, impossible to bury again. That feels like the victory this show believes in. Not paradise, just the end of the lie. Then there's the darkest possibility, and the books flirt with it, so I'll name it gently. That the founder's plan was, in its own monstrous way, correct. That humanity really would have destroyed itself. That the silos really were the only way through, and that the horror we've been watching was the price of survival, paid by people who never agreed to pay it. An ending that forces you to sit with the fact that Thurman might have saved the species by damning it, and that there may be no clean answer to whether she was a murderer or a savior. I don't think the show will let her off the hook, but I think it might refuse to fully condemn her either, because the most uncomfortable stories are the ones that admit the villain had a point, and Silo 18 itself may be running out of time, regardless of any rebellion, because there's a very practical doom hanging over it. The machines that keep it alive are old, and some of them cannot be replaced. The grow lights that feed everyone, the parts that keep the air moving and the water clean, these were built to last, but nothing lasts forever, and there's no factory down there making new ones. So one of the quiet clocks ticking under the whole show is simple entropy. Even if no one ever rebelled, even if the truth stayed buried forever, the silo would still eventually fail, because you cannot keep a machine running for 1,000 years on the parts you sealed inside it at the start. And that gives the founder's timeline a terrible tension. The silos have to outlast the poison outside, but they're slowly dying inside, and it is a race nobody can be sure they'll win. And finally, the meaning of cleaning, brought all the way around. We started the night with it, the ritual of the doomed wiping the lens, and I want to end the theory telling there too, because I think cleaning is the key to the whole show's heart. Cleaning is what happens when you give a person the truth at the exact moment they can no longer use it. The founder's cruelest invention was not the drug, or the lie, or the sealed door. It was showing the dying a glimpse of the beautiful world, real or not, only when it was too late to live in it. And the whole arc of the show, I think, is the fight to reverse that, to get the truth to people while they can still do something with it. Juliet's entire existence is a refusal of cleaning, a refusal to accept the truth only at the end. She wants it now, while she can still fight. And if the show has a soul, and I believe it does, then its ending is the moment cleaning stops, the moment the people of the silo finally see the real world, whatever it is, with their eyes open and their lives still ahead of them. Let's climb back up out of Silo 18 for a while, and think about the bigger structure, the whole hidden architecture of this world, because the theories about how the silos fit together are where the story gets truly vast. Start with the number 50. In the books there are 50 silos, dug close together in a grid, a field of buried worlds, hidden under what looks like empty land. And if the show follows that, then everything we've watched, all of Juliet's struggle, all of Bernard's cruelty, all the life and death of Silo 18, has been happening in one small cell of an enormous honeycomb. 50 silos, each holding around 10,000 people, each believing it is alone, each running the same rules, the same drug, the same lie, and above them all, watching the first silo, Silo 1, the one that does not play by the same rules because it wrote them. The theory is that Silo 1 is less a home than a command center, a place where a small rotating staff monitors the other 49 like an operator watching a wall of screens, deciding which worlds are healthy and which are failing, and holding the authority to end any of them. And here is the idea that I find the most horrifying of all, because it reframes every good thing that ever happens in a silo as part of a test. The silos are being scored. They are being watched and measured and ranked against one another, because remember the plan, only one of them is meant to survive in the end. So Silo 1 is not just keeping the others alive, it is judging them, tracking which silo stays stable, Which one keeps its people calm and obedient and productive? Which one is the best candidate to inherit the earth when the poison finally clears? And that means the rebellions, the uprisings, the moments of freedom we cheer for, are also black marks. Every time Silo 18 steps out of line, it may be lowering its own score, moving itself down the list, making itself more likely to be one of the 49 that get switched off, rather than the one that gets to open its doors. Juliet fighting for the truth might, in the cold logic of the plan, be dooming her home. Freedom and survival may be pointed in opposite directions, and nobody inside even knows the contest exists. Then there's the safeguard, the reset, one of the most disturbing tools in the Founder's Box, because the books reveal that a silo doesn't have to be fully destroyed to be dealt with. It can be wiped, flooded with gas, its rebellious population killed, and then restarted, repopulated from the children who survive hidden in its depths, or seeded fresh, its memory scrubbed clean, so the whole experiment can begin again from zero. And that casts a terrible new light on the children of Silo 17. They may not be survivors of an accident, they may be the intended remainder, the seed stock left alive on purpose, so that a failed silo could one day be grown back. The cruelty of it is staggering. The plan accounts for its own failures by building the reboot into the design, treating whole populations as drafts that can be crumpled up and rewritten. A silo is not a home in this view. It is a save file, and the founders kept the ability to reload. And what is Silo 1 protecting, really, up there at the top? What's the treasure it guards? The theory, and the books lean into this, is the legacy, a hidden archive of the old world. All the knowledge, the history, the science, the art, everything that was scrubbed from the other silos, preserved intact in the master silo. The truth of who we were is not lost. It is hoarded, kept by the keepers, denied to everyone else, held in reserve so that whichever single silo wins the long game can be handed back its inheritance at the end, like a prize. So the people underground are not living after the end of knowledge. They are living beside it, separated from their own history by a few miles of earth and a locked door, told it never existed, while the ones who ended the world sit up top with the whole library to themselves. Part 10. The quiet rebellions nobody talks about. Now let's come back down and talk about resistance, but not the loud kind, not the uprisings with blood on the stairs. I want to talk about the small, secret rebellions, the quiet acts of defiance, woven so deep into the silo that most people never even see them. Because some of the most beautiful theories in this show are about the people who fought the system without ever raising their voices. The biggest one is the suits. Think about it. Cleaning works because the suit fails. The person walks out, cleans the lens, and then, a little while later, the suit's seals give way, and the poison gets in, and they die on the hill. That is the design. The suit is meant to fail, but here's the quiet, astonishing theory the show has shown us glimpses of. The people who make the suits, down in the supply and mechanical, some of them know. They know the seals are meant to fail, and some of them have been, secretly using better materials, real heat tape, instead of the inferior stuff the system provides, in the hope that just once, someone they send out might actually survive. It's a rebellion measured in inches of tape, invisible, deniable, passed down like a secret recipe, and it may be exactly why Juliet lived. Not luck, love. Someone down in the depths who cared enough to cheat the machine on her behalf, to give her suit a fighting chance the founders never intended. The theory is that Juliet's survival, the event that cracks the whole story open, was itself a quiet act of rebellion by people whose names we barely know. The revolution started with tape, and then George, Juliet's George, whose death set her whole journey in motion. George was a computer man, a collector of forbidden relics, and the theory has always been that George found something he wasn't supposed to find, a hard drive, hidden data, the buried record of the last great uprising, the one the silo scrubbed from its own history, the rebellion generations ago that the founders would rather everyone forget. George died because he got too close to the silo's erased memory, and he passed that thread to Juliet without meaning to. So her quest begins as grief and becomes something much larger, because she inherits his dangerous curiosity along with her broken heart. The theory is that the hidden drive, the deleted files, the recovered truth of that erased rebellion is one of the seeds the whole story grows from. The silo tried to forget its own history, and one stubborn man in IT refused to let it. Which brings up the erased uprising itself. The show has told us there was a great rebellion long ago, 140 years back or so, that the records of it are missing, that whole chunks of the silo's history simply do not exist, and the theory is that this is not an accident of lost paperwork. It is deliberate amnesia, imposed on the whole silo, a mass forgetting, engineered to erase the memory of a time when the people almost broke free, because the most dangerous thing a captive population can have is the knowledge that captivity was once resisted. If you know your grandparents rose up, you might rise up too. So the founders, or their local hands, scrubbed it, tore the pages out, drugged the water, and let the story die. And every clue Juliet and others dig up about that lost rebellion is a piece of stolen memory being smuggled back into the light. The silo's own hidden past is a weapon, and the fight to recover it is one of the quietest and most important battles in the whole show. And think about the servers, the great humming machines in the heart of IT, holding the data of every person in the silo. We tend to see them as tools of control, and they are. But there's a gentler theory too, that everything is recorded means nothing is truly lost. Every life, every relationship, every deleted thing still exists somewhere in those machines, and a system that remembers everything can, in the right hands, be made to give its memories back. The same servers the founders use to watch and manage and erase could become the thing that restores the truth, if someone who understands them, someone like Lucas, decides to turn them from a cage into a library. The machine of forgetting and the machine of remembering are the same machine. It just depends who's typing. Not every question in this show is enormous. Some of them are small, strange details that lodge in your mind and won't leave. And I love these just as much as the big ones. So let's wander through a few of them together. Start with the note. In the newest season, Juliet, her memory gone, follows instructions from a mysterious note that seems to know things she doesn't, guiding her toward the truth of her own time outside. And the obvious question is, who wrote it? Who is leaving Juliet a trail back to herself? And there are a few beautiful possibilities. It could be Juliet's own hand, a message she left for herself before the forgetting, a version of her who knew she might lose everything and planted a rope for her future self to climb. It could be an ally we haven't fully understood, someone in the silo on her side, or, and this is the one that gives me chills, it could be a hand reaching down from higher up, from someone in Silo 1, the regretful founder, the ghost in the machine, nudging events from above. A note is a small thing, but a note that knows more than you do is one of the most haunting objects a story can hand you, and I don't think we've learned the half of it yet. Then the sky. When Juliet walked over the hill, she noticed something almost nobody talks about. The sky on the other side looked a little different than the sky on the screen back home, and that tiny detail is a crack in the whole fiction. Because if the view is faked, then the fakery isn't perfect, and the imperfections are clues. The theory is that the world outside is not one uniform dead grey, that conditions actually differ from place to place, that some of what the silos are shown is stitched together, recycled, imperfectly rendered, and that a careful enough eye could tell the lie from the truth by the color of the light. Juliet is an engineer. She notices when something is slightly wrong, and the show gave us that beat on purpose, I think, to plant the idea that the truth of the outside is hidden in the details the forgers didn't bother to get right. Here's a smaller one that I can't stop thinking about. Why 10,000? Why is each silo built for roughly that number? And the theory is coldly practical. 10,000 is small enough to control and feed and manage with the resources sealed inside, and large enough to keep a viable population going for centuries without collapsing into inbreeding or despair. It is a number chosen by planners, an equation about air and food and genetics dressed up as a community. Every silo is the same size because every silo is the same experiment run in parallel, and the population is held at that number by the lottery and the cleaning and the quiet math of a system that decides exactly how many people the future is allowed to have. Think about the airlock and the fire. When a cleaner is sent out, the airlock floods with argon and then burns, a gout of flame washing the chamber. We're told it's to protect the silo from the poison outside, to scorch away any contamination, and that's probably true. But there's a darker reading, that the fire is also a point of no return, a way of ensuring that once you're in that chamber, you are never coming back inside. The airlock is designed so that the door only opens one way. The fire is the silo cauterizing the wound of your leaving, making certain that the truth you might carry, if you somehow survived out there, can never be brought back in. It's a lock with teeth, and the two ruined towers on the horizon, the ones in the view everyone knows by heart. They've become almost holy, the one landmark of the outside world. And the theory is that they may not even be real, or may be a deliberately chosen image, a piece of set dressing in the fake sky designed to look ruined and hopeless. Or, if they are real, they are a clue to where the silos actually are, a skyline someone could one day recognize, a fixed point that ties this buried world to a real place on a real map. Either way, those towers are doing work. A view needs a landmark to feel real, and the founders knew it, and they gave the prisoners a ruin to stare at, so the death of the world would feel settled and certain and complete. One more small thread. The seeds. Any plan to reclaim the earth someday needs more than people. It needs life to plant when the doors finally open. And the theory is that somewhere, most likely in Silo 1, there is a vault, a store of seeds and samples, and the genetic makings of a living world kept ready for the day the poison clears. Because the founders didn't just plan to save some humans, they planned to restart an entire biosphere, to walk out one day into a dead world and reseed it from a locked cellar. And if that vault exists, it is the most valuable thing on the planet. The difference between humanity crawling out into a graveyard or into a garden. I'd bet the endgame of this whole story circles back to it, to who controls the seeds of the next world. Part 12. The irony at the heart of it all. Let's step back now and talk about the biggest idea of all, the one the whole show is built around, because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it's the sort of thing that turns and turns in your mind as you drift off. The founders were terrified of technology. That's the root of everything. They saw where it was going, the invisible machines, the weapons too small to see, the power to unmake a human body with a cloud of dust, and they decided that humanity could not be trusted with that kind of power, that we would inevitably destroy ourselves with our own cleverness, that fear is the reason for all of it. And so, to save us from our dangerous technology, what did they build? The most sophisticated technological prison ever conceived, an artificial intelligence that manages a whole population, a chemical delivery system woven into the water, sealed environments run by automated systems, surveillance in every room, a master computer scoring the fate of entire civilizations. They were so afraid of what technology would do to us that they used the most advanced technology imaginable to cage us. The cure is made of the disease, and it goes deeper, because the very thing they feared, control over life at the smallest and most total scale, is exactly what they became. They worried about a power that could reach into a body and rewrite it, and then they built a system that reaches into a mind and rewrites it, that decides who is born and who dies, and what anyone is allowed to remember. They didn't prevent the horror, they just changed its address, moved it from the open air into the water supply, from a weapon into a way of life. The nanobots take a body apart from the inside. The silo takes a person apart from the inside, memory by memory, choice by choice. Same violation, gentler tools. Per Stenson, the richest man in the world, buying up the land, funding the holes in the ground. Is the show winking at something very real and very now? The idea of the powerful building bunkers to survive the end while everyone else is left above to face it. And the theory the show seems to be making is a moral one, that a survival bought this way, by the few, in secret, over the bodies of the many, is not really survival at all. It's a kind of damnation that happens to include breathing. The founders saved humanity, maybe, but they did it by becoming exactly the kind of people who would end it. Gods deciding who lives, playing with populations like pieces, certain their fear entitled them to any cruelty. And the show keeps asking, under everything, whether a species saved like that was worth saving, or whether the saving was just the ending wearing a kinder mask. And the final irony, the one I think the whole story turns on, is memory itself. The founders' entire plan depends on forgetting. The world can only be reset if the people forget it was ever different. The silo can only hold if the past stays buried. So they built a civilization on amnesia, on the belief that a people who cannot remember cannot rebel. But memory is the one thing that will not stay buried. It comes back through a watch, through a note, through a hard drive, through a sky that's the wrong color, through a child's half-heard story, through a stubborn engineer who simply will not accept that the past is gone. The whole magnificent, monstrous machine is defeated, in the end, by the most ordinary human thing there is. The refusal to forget the people we loved and the truth we saw. That's the war, under all the other wars, remembering, against a world built to make you forget. And my deepest theory about this show, the thing I believe it's really about, is that memory wins. It always, eventually, wins. Part 13. The questions the newest season is still holding. Let's spend a while now with the season that's unfolding right in front of us, because it has opened a whole set of doors and hasn't yet told us what's behind them. And that's the best kind of thing to wonder about as you fall asleep. The first is Juliet's memory, and how much of it truly comes back. We've watched her claw her way toward herself all season, one relic, one fragment, one recovered feeling at a time. And the open question is whether she ends up whole, whether the woman who remembers everything is the same as the woman who went into the airlock, or whether something is permanently lost. And there's a theory that the memory loss, as cruel as it is, might also be a strange gift, because Juliet gets to rediscover the truth of the silo with fresh eyes, to come at it as a stranger and see how insane it all is without the numbness of having lived in it her whole life. The woman putting herself back together might understand the silo better than the woman who never forgot, precisely because she gets to be shocked by it all over again. I think the season is asking whether you can lose yourself and come back stronger, and I think, with Juliet, the answer is going to be yes. Then the algorithm, and what it does now that it knows it can be wrong. It sent 2 men to die, and they lived. Its perfect logic has a hole in it, and a system built to appear all-knowing has a real problem the moment its subjects suspect it can be fooled. So the theory is that the back half of this season is a chess match between Juliet and the machine, a human who improvises against a system that only knows how to calculate. And here's the hopeful thread. An algorithm is only as good as its assumptions, and its deepest assumption is that people can be predicted, managed, reduced to numbers. Juliet is living proof that they can't. Every time she does the thing the machine didn't expect, she isn't just surviving, she's teaching everyone watching that the machine can be beaten. I think that's the war of the season. Not people against people, people against prediction. And Lucas, over in Silo 17, with those children, the rescue that was meant to kill him instead, put him in the one place that might hold the deepest answers, a whole other silo, with its own records, its own dead history, its own version of the truth. The theory is that Lucas comes back changed, carrying knowledge from another world, proof that the silos are many, maybe even the beginnings of that network of connected silos I keep coming back to. He went in as a man the system wanted gone. He may come out as the man who ends the isolation. And if he and Juliet are reunited with everything they've each learned apart, the two of them together might hold more of the truth than anyone in the silo's history ever has. Then there's what Juliet did to Judicial, the choice to destroy that structure, rather than let the silo be drugged back into forgetting, at the cost of risking 1,000 lives. It's the darkest thing we've seen her do, and it raises a question the season hasn't answered. What is Juliet willing to sacrifice for the truth? She has always been the one who wouldn't let people die for the lie, and now she's the one deciding people might die for the truth. That's a heavy shift, and I think the show is testing her, asking whether the fight against the system can be won without the fighter becoming a little like the thing she's fighting. The theory is that this is Juliet's great moral danger this season, not death, but the slow hardening that leadership in a place like this demands, and whether she can carry that weight without losing the tenderness that made her worth following in the first place. And the quieter threads, the ones easy to lose in the noise. Orla's death, and the investigation Billings and Hank are running into it. A death that someone is looking into is never just a death in a show like this. It's a thread that leads somewhere, to a cover-up, to a truth someone wanted buried. And I suspect it ties back to the larger machinery of control in ways we haven't seen yet. And Camille, sitting close to the algorithm, one of the few who's heard the machine say the cold quiet part out loud, that the rescue was meant to be a killing. The theory is that Camille is being set up for a choice, that a person who knows the system's true intentions can't stay neutral forever, and that when she finally picks a side, it matters enormously. Keep your eye on the people the machine trusts. They're the ones who can hurt it most. And Bernard, who survived when he shouldn't have. A man like that doesn't survive by accident, and he doesn't come back without a plan. The theory is that Bernard returns to the story not as the same villain, but as something more complicated. A man who has now seen the limits of his own power, who watched his silo slip out of his grip, and who has to decide whether to claw it back or to finally tell someone the truth he's carried alone for so long. I don't think Bernard's story is a straight line to villainy. I think the show is saving something for him, a reckoning, maybe even a strange kind of redemption, or at least an explanation that makes us understand the weight he's been under. He knows where the bodies are buried, in every sense, and a season that's peeling back the Founder's secrets can't afford to waste the one man inside who already knows most of them. Let's talk about how the silo is actually governed, because the structure of power down there is a theory all on its own, a careful little machine designed to keep anyone from ever having enough control to change anything. Look at the 3 seats of power. There's the mayor, who is the face of the silo, the beloved leader the people trust. There's the sheriff, who keeps the peace and enforces the law. And there's IT, the Department of Machines and Knowledge, quiet and technical and easy to overlook. And the theory is that this triangle is not an accident of governance. It is a deliberate division, designed by the founders, so that real power is split and balanced, and can never fully gather in one place, except that one of the 3 points is secretly bigger than the others. Because it, the boring technical department nobody fears, is the one that actually holds the truth, controls the servers, talks to Silo 1, and keeps the deepest secrets. The mayor is a comforting mask, the sheriff is a tool, and IT is the real government, hiding in plain sight behind a wall of screens and jargon, exactly where no one thinks to look for a king. The founders knew that people watch the throne, so they hid the power in the server room. And the shadow system, the way each important role has an apprentice, a shadow, being trained to step into the job. It looks like sensible succession planning, a way to make sure knowledge passes on. But the theory goes darker. The shadow system is how the founders control who is allowed to know the truth. Each generation, only a chosen few are brought into the real secrets, carefully selected, tested, groomed and bound. The shadow isn't just learning a job. They're being vetted for whether they can be trusted with the lie. And the moment of becoming a shadow to it, of being told what's really going on, is the moment a person is either absorbed into the conspiracy or marked as a danger to it. It's a filter, a way of catching the smart and the curious young and deciding, one by one, whether to recruit them or destroy them. Lucas went through that filter, so long ago did Bernard. Think about Judicial too. The enforcers, the ones in the pale colors who make people disappear and keep the law's iron edge. The theory is that judicial is the founder's fist inside the silo, the department whose real job is not justice at all, but the protection of the lie, the enforcement of the pact, the silencing of anyone who learns too much. They are the ones who handle relics, who make inconvenient people vanish, who keep the whole population afraid, and that's why Juliet striking at judicial is such a huge act. She's not attacking crime. She's attacking the enforcement arm of the conspiracy itself, the muscle that keeps the truth buried. It's one of the most direct blows anyone has landed on the founder's machine from the inside. And there's a figure worth remembering here, the old head of judicial, Meadows, who turned out to be so much more than she seemed, a powerful woman, hollowed out, drinking herself through the days, who had once been full of fire. The theory about Meadows is heartbreaking. She's what happens to someone who learns the whole truth and finds they can do nothing with it. She rose high enough to see everything, the real state of the world, the plan, the lie, and the knowledge didn't free her, it crushed her. She is a warning about truth without power, about what it does to a person, to know exactly how the cage works, and to understand they still can't open it. And I think she's there in the story, as a contrast to Juliet. Two women who learn the truth, one who's broken by it, and one who's galvanized by it, and the show asking, what makes the difference between the two? I think the difference is hope. And the difference is the down deep, the people Juliet comes from, who never learned to stop believing things could be fixed. Part 15. The Diggers and the Tunnels Between Worlds. Here's a thread the newest season pulled that I think is bigger than it looks, and it has to do with what lies in the earth between the silos. This season, Juliet makes her way to something called the Digger Void, and finds more than she expected. And to understand why that matters, you have to understand the diggers. Buried deep in the mechanics of each silo, the theory goes, is an enormous excavation machine, a digger, sealed away, its existence hidden or half forgotten. And the question is, why would a sealed world, meant to keep its people in, contain a machine whose only purpose is to dig out? It makes no sense as part of a prison, until you realize what the founders may have intended it for. The diggers might be the escape hatch of last resort, the tool meant to let a silo tunnel its way out or across when the time was right. Or, more likely, they're a contingency the founders built and then desperately did not want their populations to ever use, because a digger doesn't just go up toward the poison, it can go sideways, it can go toward the next silo. And that's the enormous idea. The silos are close together, dug side by side in that hidden field, which means the earth between them is not endless, it's a wall, and a digger can go through a wall. So the theory is that the diggers are the physical version of the radio, another way to end the isolation, to connect two buried worlds, not by voice, but by tunnel, to let the people of one silo simply walk into another. In the books this is exactly what happens, a passage carved between silos, turning two sealed prisons into one connected space, and the moment it opens, the founder's whole architecture of isolation starts to collapse. Because you cannot control 50 separate obedient populations once they can walk to each other's homes. So when Juliet reaches the Digger Void and finds something there, I think we're watching the setup for one of the show's biggest moves. The moment the silos stop being islands in the earth and become a network connected by tunnels through the dark. Imagine it. People who spent their whole lives believing they were the last humans alive, walking through a rough-cut tunnel into another world full of strangers who believed the exact same thing. It would break the founder's spell forever. And it would mean that all that digging, all that machinery meant to keep people trapped, contained within it the very tool that could set them free. The prison came with the means of its own escape, sealed in the basement, waiting for someone stubborn enough to find it. There's a darker angle too, and I'd be lying if I left it out. The founders knew about the diggers. Obviously, they built them, so if a silo starts digging toward its neighbors, that's exactly the kind of catastrophic rule break that might trigger the order, the shutdown, the gas. A silo that connects to another silo may be signing its own death warrant in the eyes of Silo 1, so the tunnels are hope and danger in the same breath. They can end the isolation, or they can invite the founders to end the silos. And the tension of the whole endgame might come down to whether the people underground can connect fast enough and widely enough that the founders can no longer pick them off one silo at a time. Safety in numbers, carved through solid rock. Let's sit with time for a while, because one of the strangest and most disorienting things about the silo is that nobody down there really knows what year it is or how long they've been underground, and the theories about the true timeline are haunting. The people of the silo have a calendar. They mark the years, but the theory is that they have no reliable idea how long the silo has truly existed, because the founders scrubbed the deep past, and the Great Rebellion erased even more. The records go back only so far before they dissolve into blanks and myths. So a person in the silo might believe their world is a couple of centuries old, when it could be far more, or the numbers could have been restarted after an uprising. The clock steadily wound back to hide how many generations have actually lived and died in the dark. And there's something vertiginous about that, the idea that these people don't even own their own history's length, that time itself is one more thing the founders control. You think you know how long humanity has been buried. You don't. Nobody down there does. And that connects to the biggest outside question of all. Is the whole world dead, or just this part of it? The silos, in the books, are clustered in one region, one poisoned patch of a single country. So the theory that keeps me up is this. What if the rest of the world is fine? What if the nanobots were released, or escaped, or were deployed in one area, and the founders' catastrophe was regional, and somewhere across an ocean there are people living under open skies who have no idea that 50 silos full of humans are buried in a field, believing they're the last ones alive? It would be the cruelest twist the show could pull, that the apocalypse the silos survived was never global, that they locked themselves in the dark to escape an end that never came for everyone. I don't know if the show will go there, but the possibility that the silos are a tragedy of people who didn't need to be saved, hiding from a death that spared most of the world, is one of the darkest and most fascinating threads the story leaves dangling. Even if the poison was everywhere, there's the question of whether anyone else made it. Other bunkers, other governments, other plans. The founders can't have been the only powerful people on Earth who saw it coming. So somewhere out there, the theory goes, there might be other survivors entirely outside the silo system, people the founders don't control, don't know about, can't manage. And if the silos ever connect to the true outside world, they might find they were never as alone as they were told, in more ways than one. The loneliness the whole system is built on might be the biggest lie of all. And then the gentlest question, the one under all the others, is the air healing? Because the founders' entire plan assumes it will, that given enough centuries the nanobots break down, the poison settles, the world becomes livable again. And the theory, the hopeful one, is that this process is further along than anyone inside believes, that the clock is closer to zero than the founders' schedule says, and that the outside is becoming survivable while the people underground are still being told it's death. Juliet walking over that hill and living, even for a while, is the first data point. Every cleaner who takes a few more steps than the last is a measurement. The theory is that the show is tracking the slow return of the world, and that somewhere in the story's future is the moment someone walks out and simply doesn't die, and keeps walking into a morning nobody underground believed they'd ever see. The ones woven into everything. There are little theories scattered all through this show, quiet details that carry more weight than they seem to, and I want to gather a handful of them here, because they're the perfect kind of thing to turn over slowly as your eyes get heavy. Start with the wool itself, the pad the cleaners use to wipe the lens, and the name the whole story carries. Wool. It's such a specific thing to build a world around, and the theory is that it's a double meaning hiding in plain sight. The wool pulled over the eyes, the soft thing that blinds you, the comfort that keeps you from seeing. The cleaners wipe the lens with wool so that everyone inside can keep seeing a lie clearly. It's the material of the deception made literal, a soft grey cloth that stands for the whole gentle smothering blanket of untruth the silo lives under. And there's something almost tender about it, that the tool of the lie is something warm and soft, because that's exactly how the best lies work. They don't feel like chains, They feel like a blanket. Look at the coveralls, the colors everyone wears, coded by department. Blue for mechanical, silver or gray for IT, the pale tones of judicial, and so on. The theory is that the color coding is more than organization. It's a caste system worn on the body, a way of making sure everyone knows their place at a glance, of keeping the population sorted and separated and identifiable. The down deep and the up top don't just live apart. They're colored apart, marked from birth by the work they'll do, and the silo's rigid social order is stitched into the very clothes people wear. You can't forget your place when you're wearing it. Think about the children's songs, the little rhymes the kids sing, the games they play, in a world that scrubs its history. The theory is that the truth survives where the founders didn't think to look, in nursery rhymes and playground chants and old songs whose meanings have been forgotten but whose words carry fragments of what really happened. It's how oppressed people have always smuggled memory through time, folded into things that seem too small and innocent to matter. So somewhere in the songs of the silo's children, there may be pieces of the truth about the Great Rebellion, about the outside, about the before, hiding in plain sight, sung by kids who have no idea they're carrying history in their mouths. There's the taboo, the way people simply don't talk about certain things, the before, the outside, the deep past, and the theory is that this silence is itself engineered, a cultural wall built as carefully as any physical one, because you don't always need to forbid a thing outright. Sometimes it's more powerful to make it unspeakable, uncomfortable, rude to bring up, so that people police themselves and each other, without any law being needed at all. The silo's deepest control isn't the pact or judicial. It's the thousand small social pressures that make curiosity feel shameful, that make the person who asks too many questions into an embarrassment. The founders didn't just lock the doors, they made wanting to open them feel wrong. Consider the bodies on the hill, the cleaners who die out there, in view of the censor, left where they fall. Nobody retrieves them. And the theory is that this is deliberate too, that the dead are left as a warning, a visible ring of bodies around the silo, a reminder to anyone who watches the screen of exactly what waits for those who go outside. The corpses are propaganda. They're the founders' argument made flesh. Look what happens. Look what's out there. Stay inside. Stay safe. Stay obedient. The outside isn't just hidden, it's decorated with the dead, to make sure nobody wants it. There's Solo, and the small tender mystery of his real name, Jimmy, a man who called himself Solo because for so long alone was the only thing he was, who had to bury the name his parents gave him, along with everyone who ever used it. And the theory there isn't a plot twist, it's a human truth, that a name is a thing you need someone else to say, that identity is something we hold for each other, and a person alone long enough starts to lose even that. When we learn he's Jimmy, it's the silo giving a man back his name, and it's one of the most moving ideas in the show, that being known by others is part of what makes us ourselves. And here's one that I keep circling back to: why Juliet? Of all the people in the silo, why does she become the one who breaks it? And the theory has a few layers. Partly it's who she is, an engineer, a griever, a person who trusts evidence over authority. But there's a darker possibility worth naming, that she was watched, that the system noticed her long before she noticed it, that a person that stubborn and that capable would have been flagged, tracked, maybe even tested. The founder's machine is always looking for the ones who might become dangerous. So it's possible Juliet's whole journey has been observed from above more closely than she'll ever know, and that some of what looks like her slipping through the cracks was actually her being allowed through by the regretful hand at the top, the founder who wanted someone, finally, to make it. I don't know which it is. Maybe she's just the one who wouldn't quit. But the possibility that Juliet is not an accident, that she's the variable someone up top was hoping for, gives me chills every time. One last small thread: the seal, the symbol of the silo, and the books they're allowed to keep versus the ones they're not. Everything permitted in the silo is permitted for a reason, and everything forbidden is forbidden for a reason. And the theory is that if you made a careful list of exactly what knowledge the founders let survive and what they erased, you'd have a perfect map of what they were afraid of. They kept what makes people functional and docile. They erased what makes people restless and free. The shape of the hole in the silo's knowledge is the shape of the founder's fear, and reading that absence, noticing what's missing, is one of the most powerful things a person down there can learn to do. The silence has edges, and the edges tell you everything. Part 18. What the show changed, and why it might matter. Here's something I love doing with a show built on books, and it's the perfect quiet puzzle for a night like this. Looking at what the show changed from the source, because every change is a clue. It tells you where the writers are steering, what they're protecting, and sometimes what they're planning to surprise you with. Start with the names and the people. In the books, the congressman at the heart of the origin is named Donald, and the show calls him Daniel Keene. His sister in the books is a drone pilot, and the show makes her Charlotte, an F-35 pilot who flies straight into the thing in the sky herself. And these aren't random tweaks. Making Charlotte a fighter pilot who physically touches the nanobots, who feels them on her skin, pulls the threat out of a distant briefing and into a human body. The show wants us to experience the horror of the outside through a person, not a document. So the theory is that Charlotte is being built into a bigger, more active figure than her book counterpart, someone whose first-hand knowledge of the enemy makes her essential later, maybe one of the sleepers up top, maybe the one person who can't be lied to about what's really out there. Then the algorithm, which is far more present and personified in the show than the systems described in the books. The show has made the silo's control mechanism into something that feels almost like a character, a cold intelligence that speaks, decides, and schemes. And the theory about why is that a show needs an antagonist you can feel in every episode, a presence in the room, where a book can get away with a diffuse system of rules. So by giving the machine a voice and a will, the show is setting up a confrontation the books frame more abstractly. I suspect the algorithm is being built toward a real reckoning, a moment where Juliet, or Lucas, or Camille comes face to face with the intelligence running their lives and has to outthink it directly. The show turned the system into a villain because it wants us to watch that villain lose. The memory drug is another place the show leans harder than the source. The water, the forgetting, vitamin D+, the whole chemistry of control, is front and center in a way that makes the silo's grip feel more invasive and more chemical. And the theory is that this is the show finding its own central metaphor. The books are about isolation and lies. The show is increasingly about memory and forgetting, about a people drugged out of their own history. That shift tells me the ending the show is building toward will hinge on remembering, on the drug failing or being cut off, on a whole population waking up at once. The writers keep pointing at memory as the battlefield, which is usually a sign of where the final fight will be. And here's the thing to hold on to about all these changes. A show that diverges from its source is a show that can surprise even the people who read the books. So if you're someone who knows how Wool and Shift and Dust end, be a little careful about assuming you know how this ends. The writers have shown they'll rename, recast, restructure, and reinvent. They've kept the bones and changed the flesh, which means the show is free to break your heart in ways the books didn't, and to save people the books didn't, and to answer questions the books left open. The divergences aren't mistakes, they're the writers keeping their hands free, and that, to me, is exciting, because it means nobody, book reader or not, gets to feel safe. Part 19. The argument over what Juliet actually saw. Let's go back outside one more time, to the single most important few minutes in the whole show, when Juliet walked over the hill, and let's really pick apart what she saw, because there's a genuine puzzle in it that the theories still argue over. What she found on the other side of the hill was another silo, and above it, a sky. And here's where it gets interesting, because the sky she saw with her own eyes and the sky shown on the screens were not quite the same. So the question is, which one is real? The strong theory is that the screen feed is the fake, a rendered image, and that Juliet's naked eye view was closer to the truth, a poisoned but slightly different world than the one her people are shown. But there's a subtler version too, that even what Juliet saw through her visor might have been managed, that the helmet's display is itself a screen, capable of showing her a curated version of reality, and that the only truly honest look at the outside is the one you get in the seconds before you die, when the suit fails and the visor goes dark, and you finally see the world with nothing between your eyes and the air. That's the cruelest possibility, that nobody who has gone outside has ever actually seen the real outside, because they were looking at it through a piece of technology designed to lie to them right up until the moment it stopped mattering. The visor shows the beautiful green world to make them clean. The screens show the grey dead world to make them stay. And the truth, whatever it is, sits in between, glimpsed only in the gap between the lie that sends you out and the lie that keeps you in. Juliet living long enough to walk over the hill means she got a longer look than almost anyone, and even she can't be fully sure what was real. And this is why Juliet's engineering mind matters so much. She's the one person trained to distrust a reading, to ask whether the instrument is telling the truth. Everyone else takes the screen at face value because they've never had reason not to. Juliet looks at the same image and thinks sensors can be wrong, sensors can be faked, let me check. And that single habit of mind, the refusal to trust a display just because it's official, is the crack the whole conspiracy falls through. The founders built a world governed by screens, and they never fully accounted for the one kind of person who instinctively doubts a screen. In a way, the silo was undone the day it produced a really good engineer. There's one more piece of this worth sitting with. The argument over the outside is really an argument about hope, because the whole system runs on the belief that outside means death, that there's nothing out there worth the risk. And the moment anyone proves that's not entirely true, the moment even one person walks out and lives and sees something green, the founder's deepest lie starts to crumble. That's why cleaning has to be so reliable, why the suits have to fail, why the bodies stay on the hill. The system cannot survive a single living witness to a survivable world. And Juliet, walking, breathing, seeing, for longer than anyone thought possible, is that witness. She is the thing the whole design was built to prevent. Hope, with a pulse, on the wrong side of the door. Part 20. A few more of the people, and the ties between them. Before we close, let me gather up a few more of the people, because the relationships in this show carry theories all their own, and they're gentle things to think about as sleep comes. There's Walker, down in mechanical, the woman who hasn't left her workshop in years, who's so afraid of the open spaces of the silo that she's made herself a small safe world in one room. And the theory about Walker is lovely and a little heartbreaking. She's what the silo does to a certain kind of mind, someone so aware, on some level, of how wrong the world is, that she's retreated from all of it into the one space she can control. But she's also brilliant and connected, and it's Walker's knowledge of the silo's wiring, its hidden communication lines, that helps truth travel where it isn't supposed to. So the recluse, who's afraid to leave one room, turns out to be one of the people most capable of reaching across the whole silo, because she understands its nervous system better than anyone. The person who can't move through the silo is the one who can send a message anywhere in it. I love that the show hides a lifeline inside its most frightened character. Think about Bernard and Meadows, and the quiet history between them, two people at the top, who both knew the truth, who carried it in completely different ways. The theory is that they're two halves of the same tragedy, the true believer and the broken one, the one who used the knowledge to control, and the one the knowledge hollowed out. And somewhere in their shared past is the story of how you learn the worst thing in the world and decide what kind of person it makes you. They knew each other before they were what we met them as, and the flashbacks and hints suggest a whole buried relationship, an alliance or a love or a rivalry between the two people who understood the silo best. Their story is the story of what the truth costs the people who hold it, told twice, in two different colors of ruin. And the down deep as a whole. Knox and Shirley, and the mechanics who keep the lights on, I keep coming back to them, because they're the show's beating heart, and its theory of where change really comes from. The founders put their control at the top, in IT, in the servers, in the clean, quiet offices. But the power to actually run the silo, to keep it alive, or let it die, sits at the bottom, with the people who turn the wrenches. And the theory the show keeps proving is that real power isn't where the secrets are. It's where the work is. The founders can control the truth all they like, but they can't run the generator. And the day the people who run the generator decide they've had enough, no amount of secrets up top can save the system. That's why every uprising rises from the deep. Not because the poor are desperate, though they are, but because the deep is where the silo actually lives, and whoever holds the machines holds the world. The founders built their kingdom on top of the very people most able to bring it down. And I think, when this story finally ends, it ends down there, in the heat and the noise of mechanical, with the people who were never supposed to matter, deciding the fate of everyone above them. Outro. So that's where we'll leave it for tonight. Deep underground, with the machines humming, and the grey world on the screen, and all these quiet questions turning slowly in the dark. And if there's one thing I hope stays with you as you drift off, let it be this. Silo is a story about people buried in lies, drugged into forgetting, sealed away from the truth by others who decided they knew best. And against all of that, against a machine 2 centuries in the making, the thing that keeps winning, the thing that cannot be fully buried, is memory. A watch that brings a woman back to herself. A song a child sings without knowing what it means. A name returned to a man who thought he'd lost it. A stubborn engineer who simply refuses to forget what she saw over the hill. The founders built a whole world on the belief that people could be made to forget, and the whole show is the slow, patient proof that they were wrong. I don't know how it ends. Nobody does yet. Not while the newest season is still unfolding. Maybe Juliet gets her sky. Maybe she only gets the truth. Maybe the silos fall. Or maybe they simply learn to speak to one another, and the lie comes apart on its own. But whatever happens, I think the show has already told us what it believes. That the truth is worth the cost of finding it. That people are not fish in a tank to be managed. And that no lie, however deep you bury it, stays buried forever. Thank you for going down into the dark with me tonight. It's a strange, sad, beautiful story. And it's better with company. If you drifted off somewhere in the middle, that's all right. The theories will still be here when you come back. And so will I. Rest easy. Breathe slow. And somewhere far above all of us, real or not, imagine a green hill under an open sky, waiting. My name is Ryan. Sleep well, and I'll see you on the next one.